Today on the Self Smarter podcast.
I don't think you or I believe that our journey is going to be like someone who's in their 20s journey. There's just no way. Look, we live in a different day and age. So that's not possible. However, what maturity and time and really, quite frankly, just seasons of life that we go through presents that part that experience is similar.
Hi, we're Danelle and Megan, the hosts of this conversation-centric podcast for leaders seeking to be better every day. Whether you choose to be a leader in the workplace, at home, or in your community, we believe the most effective leaders are equipped to not only be self-starters, but self-smarter.
Hello, and welcome to Self Smarter. I'm Megan, and this is my co-host, Danelle.
Hello, everyone.
Look at us. We're remote again. Now we're doing the real remote thing. I'm not in New York. Yeah. You're not here. We're split screen. This is cool.
Wow. I know. This is a first.
It is a first. Yeah, I can weird out really fast about how strange it is that you're in New York and I'm in Dallas and we're recording at the same time. It's just technology.
It's technology.
Science.
It's fun.
Science.
I
Yeah.
do want to give a disclaimer too for our few listeners that actually watch us on YouTube. You're going to have a bumpy ride because I don't know if I'm supposed to look at the camera or the screen or all the other stuff in this room. But just hang in there with
us. Look over there. Shiny objects in the corners. No.
Well, because I'm supposed to look at the camera, but you're over there anyway.
Okay, got it. No, I got it. This is just new for us, guys. Thank you for your patience. We're trying. Yes. We're trying. Okay. So we just had an epic episode. Our last episode was all about agility and armor, and really, long story short, it was a story about you moving to New York City and a new path that you're on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We've gotten a lot of good feedback about that.
Yeah, people have, I think, really appreciated a lot about the episode. I think people enjoyed the humor about the bird attack on the showboat, and
yes, that really
so we're
happened.
getting a lot of funny comments about that. And certainly, I've personally gotten a lot of support for what I was willing to share about the journey I've been on personally, and a lot of encouragement for the next chapters and the things that I'm going to be focused on. And so, I'm very appreciative of first and foremost your leadership and support in helping me get through that story multiple times within a 2-week period, first our team and then the group at the event where we spoke, and then certainly sharing it with our podcast listeners. So thank you for that. And thanks for everyone who is in support of, honestly, just sincere vulnerability and a sincere desire and quest for better. So that's what we're all on. If you're listening to this podcast, that's what we're about. And I just wanted to share that I'm on it also personally. So,
and we thank you for that. And I think it's been well received, and certainly it's a joy to work with you and to be on this journey with you, which is really what I want to talk about right now.
Okay. I feel like it's coming through that we miss each other.
Yes. Yes, we do. We do miss each other, and I'll be there soon.
So now our listeners are getting to experience a kind of a verbal hug.
Yeah, verbal hug. Yeah. And that I personally, and one of our mutual friends brought this up to me earlier this week, or maybe it was late last week, it doesn't matter. But what she said was, Megan, you have a front row seat to some cool stuff that's going on in Danelle's life. And I was like, I do. I actually really, really do. And so I thought it might be fun if we just kind of opened up with, okay, stop. I'm going to back. Not really. Look, I don't want to stop it. I want to stop myself and back up. I left New York. The team and I went to New York to get Danelle settled. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. We come back. I mean, it's not a day. It's not one day. She's not been there a week. And she's like, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe what happened to me last night. So and it's like, not even like it's night, it's day. It's what's she going to do and what's happening and who's she talking to and who's she meeting? I mean, you're just one of those people that things happen to. And so I thought it would be fun here at the top to talk about just, what's been going on.
So when our mutual friend said front row seat, she's not talking about front row seat to my personal journey, which you've been on.
Yes.
The front row seat to that. She's talking about
the New York experience.
The New York experience. Yes.
So what's been happening?
Well, the event you're talking about. So, all right, I think y'all left on a Monday or Tuesday.
Yes.
And I kind of found myself through the rest of that week, I spent some time with Mackie. I just was basically getting acclimated to the city. And then on Saturday, it was raining. It rained for like 5 days in a row. And I committed myself to just staying in my apartment. And what I want to do, I'm usually here for 3 to 5 days, say, for the last 10 years or 20 years of all my visits to New York. And then certainly sometimes a little bit longer with Mackie being in school here. So with this extended stay, I decided that I wanted to find new things to do in the city. Normally I'm here, I go see a show or a music event that's, at a concert or whatever. And then certainly the food and all of that. And so I have committed that I want to explore the arts beyond what's obvious. And I Google, and I kid you all not, this is how it happened. I Google something about live music, and up comes this concert that was on a Monday night. So my first Monday night alone in New York, meaning the team wasn't here and Mackie's working. And so it was Rockers on Broadway is what it was called. Now that just sounds amazing. Rockers on Broadway, and honoring Diane Warren, one of the most prolific songwriters of our generation. So I'm thinking, how cool is this? How am I ever going to get a ticket to this event? Well, it was easy. I bought a ticket like within 10 minutes. And so I have no idea what I'm walking into. I don't know how big this event hall space is. And I mentioned where I was going to Mackie, and she goes, Mom, it's a really cool event space in the West Village, which I absolutely love. And I walk in, and I apparently had bought a VIP ticket, but it wasn't that expensive. So I was like, oh, well, cool. And they said, you get to go into this pre-scenario, like this pre-show scenario where there was a bar and there was a red carpet and photographs were being taken. And so I'm like, wow. And everyone is dressed to the nines. Thank goodness I actually.
You did it up that night?
Well, yeah, I took a little extra minute. And so I walk in, and I'm getting myself a drink at the bar. I don't know a soul. And I can feel this person next to me and these two people, and they're talking, and I recognize one of the voices, and I can't figure out who it is. And I don't want to turn around and gawk, because clearly I'm in the cool kids club at this point. I don't want to seem, over anxious. Well, I turn around eventually, and that's my favorite one of my favorite artists of all time, and not musical artists, but painters. And so I've been following her for years on Instagram and just love her work, and her style is outlandish, and not all of her work is for me, but I absolutely. And she's unmistakable. So she's easy to see. And anyway, we struck up a conversation. So here I am within the first 10 minutes of my first solo event in New York. And I'm meeting, an artist that I just have.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And so then I end up becoming kind of pals with her and her entourage, which she had. And what I didn't realize is that she was a big sponsor of the event. And so this event is backed by a foundation that helps young artists find their way onto live theater. So of course I'm interested in going. Anyway, it ended up being a star-studded night, and I'm going to save the rest of those details for our music moment, because my chin was on the ground the entire night, but it was just the best possible event I could have ever stumbled upon. And that's just become a trend since, is that I keep stumbling into these incredible experiences. I think it's New York. Mm-hmm. And yes, I do have a curious personality. That's why I think it happens, is my curiosity leads me into these situations. So and I'm just going to keep following it and see where it takes me.
And, I'll listen, people who are listening, I have a front row seat, and guess what? So do you. So I don't think that we planned on you having these sort of interesting experiences with celebrities?
I didn't even think about it.
No.
I didn't think about it.
No. So this is all just fresh, and this is what's happening. And so thank you for listening and, joining the funny club, because evidently Danelle's 2 weeks in New York have been eventful. And you met someone else. Do we want to talk about that?
Including getting to go to an event the other night where I got to meet the infamous Gloria Steinem, which was really cool. I read her book at 17, and just to get to hear her speak was phenomenal. So it's just a journey. It's all a journey, and I just am opening my mind and my heart and seeing where it takes me. So
love it.
Let's hope it's not into a dark alley anytime soon. So.
Well, no, ma'am. And I'll be there next week. But
I know, I can't wait.
I know. And before we move on to more of Danelle's New York City shenanigans, let's hit this commercial. Okay, so you've heard us talk about the work we do at DMA. Let me tell you something. One of the best products our team can build for a business is a custom messaging guide. This high-level document spells out the story of your business so it's easy for your customers to grasp and ignites curiosity in their minds about how your products and services can truly make a difference in their business. The best part of all, we do them for a flat fee. They have become one of our best-selling products in 2022, and we'd love to get one in the works for your business. Send an email to info@dma-solutions.com, and we'll set up a call to get your messaging guide in the works. Okay, so, this is kind of a poignant topic today, personal growth over the decades. Mm-hmm. What we want to talk about is, and this is going to be just kind of interesting. I had this idea, Danelle and I talked about it. I was like, everybody goes through different points of life, different decades sort of symbolize different phases of growth.
Yeah.
And it's just part of being an adult. And really it starts in your 20s and then it moves forward. Mm-hmm. We both have experience in our 20s, 30s. I'm in my 40s. You just wrapped your 40s. So you're just moving into a new decade. And then we have future decades to explore, God willing.
Yes, please. Mm-hmm.
As leaders, what we find is that people have ideas, notions about what a decade could be, should be. And we just sometimes find ourselves helping people along with some advice about anecdotally what we've been through, how to frame things now that we have these decades under our belts and can look back and offer some advice.
Yeah. And I think too, again, having many at this point decades under our belts, at least that's the case for me, is that I look at the different generations and I look at the way there's almost these prescriptions, these prescribed notions about what you're supposed to be doing at any given age or time in your life. And one of the things that I became conscious of is a lot of those prescriptions, quite frankly, aren't healthy. And relative to, the way you may compare yourself to others or the way that you may feel like you're either ahead or behind. And I think what we find ourselves as leaders, to your point, is talking through that with our team, who many of them are in their 20s and 30s now. And, we have a good group, a larger group in their 30s now. And we don't, I don't think you or I believe that our journey is going to be like someone who's in their 20s journey. There's just no way. Look, we live in a different day and age. So that's not possible. However, what maturity and time and really, quite frankly, just seasons of life that we go through presents, that experience is similar. So we find ourselves getting the questions a lot, like, what would you do differently if you had your 20s to do over again, or 30s, or what would you recommend that I focus on? So we get this question a lot, which I think is where your idea for this episode came from. And then obviously we've been talking a lot about, me turning 50 and what that has meant, and how I was excited about it and then I found myself in the fetal position over it. But and now on the other side, as I enter the other side of that, really looking forward to the next decade. So I think that's what we're going to talk about. But I definitely want to put a preface to this discussion, because it's going to be a little bit different, is that we don't have an illusion that our journey is similar to someone who's in their 20s or 30s. But again, the life experiences, that's what we're going to pull from, because those tend to be similar no matter what age you're in.
Totally. Yeah. And so I like the prescription angle, because you're right. You know, if we're just going into it and we're talking about the 20s, I think we give ourselves prescriptions, or there's societal prescriptions for how your 20s are supposed to be. But the truth is, in your 20s, you know, you're still really trying to figure things out. You've made that transition from teenager child really over into adulthood, and trying to figure out what that feels like and what that looks like, and all the responsibilities that come with it, the weight of it.
Yeah.
What we find, and what we talk about a lot relative to personal development and growth, is the prescription of you have to be perfect. And I think we've talked about this before, that this somehow we adopt this notion in elementary school, potentially, and then onward into middle school. And as we're accepted into programs or schools or not, that perfection is the key to success. When in fact, looking back, we know now that it is not. And you and I suffer both from perfectionism tendencies. We've had to do a lot of work to get over that. Yeah. So would you say that those are kind of the prescriptions of life in the 20s? I mean, it's all about, you know, how do I pave this path? What I've been told I need to be and what I want to be. I mean, I remember when I was 25, I had a map. Like, I was like, okay, by the time I'm 30, I'm going to X, Y, Z, and then I'm going to have a baby on December 25th of 2023. You know, like, I made up all these milestones.
Right. And I think the key is, like, there's nothing wrong with having goals and objectives. And in fact, I think that was very healthy that you had that, and you had given thought to it. I was similar. I had this, I don't know, this order of things that were in my mind, the way I was taught. And I don't know that I was set down and taught this, but I was, you know, you take it from multiple sources, but that I was like, you do this, then you do this, then you do this, and you do this. And most of that was spot on for me. And I started to think back, like, one of the things for my experience, and I think this is true, and I'm seeing it now with my 22-year-old daughter, is what I thought was the minute you turn 21, boom.
Yeah, done.
You're a full-fledged adult and everything's developed. Well, now I'm learning, working with my doctor, is that, first of all, the maturation of our brain, you know, we still have a long way to go after 21.
Yes.
And so I remember thinking to myself when I turned 28, wow, I've grown up more from 21 to 28 than I did from 12 to 21. And I've learned more. I've learned more about who I am and what I stand for. So I think we have created this cadence of high school, then college. And again, don't get me on my rant around higher education at this, you know, I'll keep myself off the rant. But that's kind of the general path for people. And then, you know, then you go out into the world of work or whatever it may be for you. That's kind of the common path. And then we're expected to just be able to envelope adulthood and all of these things. Meanwhile, you're very correct, is that we're trying to lean into being really good at all the things that we're doing, and we're not being taught the real skills that help us kind of emotionally adapt to the fact that, yes, we're expected to behave like an adult, but we're still, our minds are still maturing to get us to a point to where we can handle more of the actual reality. So, and again, I don't want to get too far down a rabbit hole with this, but it's just interesting, the expectations of one, the minute you graduate high school for some, and for many, many more college, the expectation is just boom.
Right. It's like a skyrocket. Like I'm
Right.
a rocket. Yeah.
And we at DMA, which is I think why we had some of the culture issues, and we talk about that on our 2 episodes at the beginning of the podcast around culture, is that we had those same expectations of people. I mean, yeah, you come into this organization at 22 years old, out of college, you should be able to not do like performance wise, but you should be able to know all these things about yourself. And we're like, and then what we learned the hard way is no. We're not being taught those things.
Right.
And if we want an organization where that is the case, we're going to have to be the ones who adapted ourselves. Okay. We had to learn that. And then we had to learn, oh, wait a minute. No, if we want to be an organization that is about a greater human experience, then we've got to create that exact environment around education and development and those sorts of things. So yeah, 20s are, I think if we're going to look at all the decades, if you will, of time in one's given journey, I think this is the one where we need to be working on the most, in my opinion.
In terms of a gap. Yeah. Where there's opportunity.
Gap. Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's preparing teenagers for the fact that, and really for the listeners who are in their 20s, and I know we have them because we just met a bunch of them in Nashville. For those of you who are in your 20s, it's like, give yourself permission to just come into the workforce and be okay with being imperfect. Listen, be a sponge.
Be curious, yes.
Yeah, be curious. Use the experience of your elders in order to guide your path. Of course, it's going to be your path and you're going to figure it out. But use cues from others and don't feel like you have to be fitting into any kind of mold. Go at your own pace. We have a lot of, or at least for me, I had a lot of, comparing myself to others. Well, how do they have this? Or they make this much money or whatever. I'm not traveling enough. They're traveling. And I know you probably had some of that too, because that's human nature in our 20s.
Comparison. Yeah. And we've talked about it definitely in relation to the Enneagram, but I think and I think especially now, comparison as it relates to having and having not is more prolific because of social media.
Yes.
And, so it's easier to find yourself into, that trap. And it literally is a trap. And it doesn't stop in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. In fact, I see it almost getting worse. But yeah, no, it's real easy to do that, especially out of the gate. And I, from a career perspective, because I graduated college in 94. So what was happening in 94 was we were having a huge technology boom. It was almost the second one we'd had, and because we had one in the 80s and then we had one in the 90s. And I had friends that were getting hired right out of college, making sometimes triple what I was making. And first of all, since we're in the advice section, never talk about money with someone else. I don't care who they are, because you're always going to lose. You're going to lose if you're making more, and you're going to feel like poop if you're making less.
That's
so
right.
Yeah, it's never a good thing, but I had to learn the hard way. And I've been on both sides of the discussion around, hey, what are you making? And it just never works out good. So that's just some free advice. Take it, do with it what you want.
That's right.
But I do think, the comparison relative to all the other things is real simple. So if you can avoid that. And you mentioned pace. And I think what we're mostly talking about here is pace relative to your emotional development.
Absolutely.
That's what's being skipped. I think we focus so hard when we are in this, again, we're going to generalize it, but this starting your career phase. And it's easy to do comparisons there because there's just this kind of black and white. Someone's doing this or I'm not, or vice versa. But relative to emotional maturity, that's where you can have a leg up. And if you can start the journey of being self-smarter, and if you can start that sooner before it becomes a necessity like it was for me and quite frankly for us, you're going to be ahead. You will end up ahead relative to your emotional health, your physical health, and, quite frankly, your mental health. So
that's right. And we say that a lot here.
Yeah.
And I think we even, we've probably said it here on the podcast. We say it at work, and we also say it on the podcast, but it's all about your development now. If you're in your 20s or 30s, it doesn't matter how old you are. Just the fact that you're developing, you'll just get there faster than we did. We always say that. We just hope if we're passing this knowledge on to someone, a loved one, a colleague, an employee, whatever, that if they're in their 20s, we just want you to get there faster. And so I think really too, just so for our listeners' benefit, if you're listening to this and you are in your 30s, 40s, 50s plus, fine. You probably know someone in their 20s. And so maybe just talking to them about, listen, yes, you had an experience, and it's obviously going to be very different than what their experience is today, because it's a different world we live in now. But just encouraging that focus on personal development.
Yeah.
Who am I? How do I feel? What brings me joy? What stresses me out? What brings me anxiety? That's all emotional and mental health. And just help them get used to that. I think that's the big advice for people in their 20s.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Then we move on to life in our 30s. And this is the time in the decade when we really start to settle into decisions that we've made in our 20s, good or bad. We hopefully have a career that starts to flourish. I'm guessing people that are listening to this podcast have a career, because this is a leadership and people development, personal development podcast. So we're moving into really starting to put into motion the things that we set into place in our 20s. We work hard in our 30s. These are the times when you really have to lean in, because there's, this visual has never really set well with me, but at this moment, I don't know of another one, but like a ladder, and you're trying to do the work, and you're trying to earn the bucks to pay the rent and the mortgage and all those things, and have the babies, and all those things is really what it's about in the 30s. Meanwhile, you're hungry and eager for a balance of family and work, what you perceive to be quote unquote balance. And we hear that a lot. And I know you and I both talked about that a lot in our 30s.
Yeah.
Really, it's just the 30s are a big hustle. They're just a big ol' hustle. At least for those of us.
A lot of people in their 30s have, like you said, made decisions and choices that, whether it's they've started a family, or they're beginning to start a family, and the thing about kind of backing up and going back to the work scene, hopefully by your 30s, you're well into your 10,000 hours of work knowledge.
That's right.
So you have skills relative to your work, and we're hopeful that you also, are working to garner the real skills of empathy, listening, communicating, and all the things that we talk about on this podcast. But I think you possess a lot more knowledge and experiences. Meanwhile, yes, you are now wanting to turn that into something that benefits you and potentially your family, depending on what your decisions and choices are in your life. And so it's a critical decade, I think, too, in your life, because it symbolizes it. You're still youth. You're still young, and potentially you have more responsibility than you've ever had. And so I think that's where the tug around balance really starts to kick in. And we struggled with it until I know I did. And I know that you did too, and I can just speak to myself in terms of when I finally understood, and we have a whole episode on this, because I was at a conference and I decided to say out loud when somebody asked me about how I could do it all. I'm like, well, I don't, and balance is bullshit. And so I still stand by that. But it took me in my 30s years of kind of wrestling with that notion. And when I realized that balance is not a destination, and balance is something that we should be working towards in any given week in smaller chunks of this week I'm going to be, I'm going to be a really great CEO, but this week, I'm not going to have a lot of time personally for whatever it may be, and vice versa. That goes back and forth. And so I think this is, again, a decade where you still feel your youth. Mm-hmm. You have these skills, and then you're just working on balancing it all. And I will say in 30s is when you really start, in my opinion, to really start to have to make decisions about relationships. Mm-hmm. That at least that was the case for me, and I'm pretty sure it was the case for you as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In terms of all the friendships and that that you've taken with you from potentially your school days, let's just generally mm-hmm. call it that. And then you've made industry friends, most likely. And the list just gets larger and larger and larger. And again, I don't mean to say that in a negative or derogatory way, but it's just reality.
Yes.
And then usually what's happening in your 30s is that, you have family members that, your family dynamics changing because of age and because of just the natural course of life. And so it's, and again, I think every decade has a very special time for us to experience things, but that's what I remember about my 30s.
Yeah. And I'm with you. It was a very, it's a very special decade. So those of you that are listening that are in your 30s, and again, I know we have a lot of people who listen who are in their 30s, just remember to take time for yourself. If I'm telling my 30-year-old self something, mm-hmm. it's take time for yourself. I remember, Danelle, you and I went to a women's conference. I know we were in our 30s. Like, I know it because mm-hmm. I know who was there. And I remember it was sort of early on in my days working with you. Mm-hmm. And we were listening to a speaker who stood on the stage, and her whole speech was about saying no. And it was a revelation to me. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was like, what? She wants me to say no? What she was saying was, learn to pick and choose. If mm-hmm. balance is a struggle for you, just say no. Mm-hmm. Because you're probably the problem. You're right. Probably the one who's stretching yourself too thin, or you're probably the one who's not making good decisions about where you spend your time and how you spend your time and who you spend it with.
Yep.
That was an intense moment for me. I mean, I walked away from that still struggling to say no. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to pretend like I've got it all figured out. I don't. But the fact that I got permission to do it was, and just even have that idea in my head that I might be able to say, you know what, I don't think I should go to that party on Saturday and, whatever.
Yeah, I think the word you're looking for is like in our 30s, we really start to have to prioritize.
Yes.
And that is often a struggle. I mean, it was a major struggle for me, especially being a 7 on the Enneagram who suffers from FOMO. Like, I don't want to miss out on anything. And then you just work yourself into the ground. So learning being cognizant of it's the most important part of when am I overcommitted. And when you struggle with, I don't want to miss out on that. I don't want to not do that. Or I want to maintain all of these relationships. And then you find yourself, burned out and fatigued. And a lot of times what we experienced ourselves and what we certainly experience at our company is that a lot of times when you do that, and it often happens in this stage of life, that you tend to blame your work.
Yes.
I did.
All the work's fault. Yes.
All the work's fault. But meanwhile, we're at a wedding every weekend and a baby shower, and all that stuff is happening, especially in the 30s. And not to say that it doesn't happen in the 20s too, but I mean, really in the 30s, because now you still have weddings happening. Then you got kids a coming and just all these life events. And then you still want to, do your college trips and all the stuff and the football games and you fill in the blank, whatever your thing is. God, I didn't want to miss a concert. I didn't want to miss a nothing. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, I'm working too hard. Oh, well, maybe it's my personal life too. And so it's just figuring that stuff out. And, I think we have the tools now, I know that there are tools now that help us learn more about ourselves. That, my goodness, and we say this a lot, if we would have just had it, I'm not even going to be greedy enough to say if we could have had it in our 20s, but if we could have started this journey in our 30s,
Yes.
just one decade earlier than what we did, because we started in our 40s. I mean, again, personal growth and development have, but I'm talking at the deep level that we decided to commit to. If we say a lot, if we would have just had it in our 30s, what would that have done in relative to, our emotional and mental wellness, and quite frankly, relationships that unfortunately didn't make it through that period of our lives, work and personal. So, and so it's just, again, if we can impart any, again, I don't like to use the word advice, but that's what she has written down here. And so I'm going to go with that. But if we could share anything, is, I think it is start that process sooner. And I think you have it written here well, is like learn to communicate at the next level. And this is the decade where communication, and that goes back to learning how to say no. That's learning how to set healthy boundaries and the things that are part of the communication process that we need to be more conscious of. And if you can start to develop those skills, because you've been working in your 20s to probably get your what's called the hard skills, the actual how to do the work, and to be able to do it at at whatever level needs to be for you to be successful. But it's that emotional work where if you can start that, by all means, if you can start it in your 20s, please. But 30s is where it really kicks in, especially around communications.
Yes. And knowing your strengths and weaknesses very well. I wish in my 30s I would have been very aware of, I can do other things besides dance well, that would have helped me. Like, I'm a good writer, or, I don't know, maybe I have a good radio voice. I don't know. People have been saying that lately. I don't know.
Yeah,
you do too.
You do.
We both do, maybe. But I didn't know those things. And so it didn't occur to me that we'd ever be on a microphone doing a podcast when we could have, I'm just like, if I would have known that sooner, if you would have known that sooner, leaning into your strengths, obviously, and understanding your weaknesses is just going to serve you so well in a decade that's so critical, not only for yourself, but people you've chosen to do life with. And if you're a parent or a leader of some kind, you're exposing them to that, and you're just starting them earlier. It's almost like the gift that keeps on giving.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So life in your 40s.
Whoa. Back up.
Okay.
I'm looking at your notes and I'm like so excited about your last bullet point. You didn't mention it because I
skipped on right over.
And that one's key.
It is. It's save your money. That's the advice I wrote down.
And that should be in every decade. But yeah, if you can start in your 20s and then literally put the pedal to the metal in your 30s, you will be very, very glad that you did.
Yes. Save yo money. Just do it.
Yes.
And y'all who are in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s know that. Save your money as much as you can when you're young. Because
you know it one way or the other. You know it because it's benefited you, or you are now looking back with a tinge
I wish I would have hustled.
Regret.
Yeah, and saved that money. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry I skipped that one. But moving into the 40s, not that money is any less important. Money's always important for health and wealth, or health and just being comfortable. In the 40s, we really start to step into our power. Or at least this is what I have found. And I don't even really like the word power. I do on the one hand, because I think I view it in a softer, more soft skills type of way versus like muscular Wonder Woman. Like, I don't think of it that way, like a physical thing. It's more like I'm strong enough to be able to handle the difficult things.
Yeah, I used to cringe at the word power because I think first of all, I think just as a woman, it's been used...
Yeah, and it's a negative
almost
thing.
negatively. And what I've learned in my 40s and now my first year of 50 is that emotional power is where it is at. And that's what's critical. But it took a big chunk of my 40s for me to figure that out.
Yeah, I remember when I turned probably 42. It wasn't when right when I turned 40. I'm the oldest of all my cousins. I'm an only child, but I have a lot of cousins. And they all would ask me, how does it feel to be in your 40s? And I couldn't find the word. I didn't say, I'm stepping into my power. That would be kind of a weird thing to say at Easter brunch. But I was like,
That would be amazing.
yeah, I was like, I'm just kind of settled into me. Like, I'm just sort of like accepting it and gonna lean into her because this is who I am. And I'm going to continue to develop, but I don't know. It's like a really interesting mindset. So, this is the time when you settle into what, Megan? Settle into theories about life, people and what I want or what you want from the work that you're doing. Am I doing the right work? Am I helping people? I think people have these revelations. I believe young people now in their 20s are having those revelations a lot sooner. We in our 40s, me in my 40s right now, I'm like, wait, I luckily chose an industry when I turned 30 that would serve me in this way, unbeknownst to me. I love fruits and vegetables and I love marketing. So I went towards that direction. Now I look back and I'm like, dang, I made a good decision for myself, And so this is where we kind of reflect midway in life where, the decisions we've made in our 20s, what we've lived through in our 30s, that hustle, that building. And now what? You see the benefits. And so just when we think about advice for people in their 40s, and I think probably the big fat middle of our listeners are probably in this age range, probably in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
Be yourself. Be yourself. At this point, you're not fooling.
Yourself. So
know yourself and be yourself.
Know yourself and live in that.
That's right.
And live in the good parts for sure, but be accountable for the parts that need work.
That's exactly
and
right.
be committed to that. That to me is very critical at this stage of life, is to be able to fully understand that. And if we can do that more, we're going to live in a lot more health.
Agreed. And I have a true confession. I mean, we haven't discussed this. We did talk about this episode generally, but I feel like now in my 40s, if I talk to someone my age or older, if they're unable to accept or take accountability or responsibility for something they have done or something they have said, it is a complete and utter turnoff to me. Like, it's an unfortunate series of events of what goes on in my mind and in my heart in the moment when I know something has happened or someone's made a decision or something has been said and the person who did it is unable to accept that. I'm like, you are so far behind. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm kind of going off on a tangent right now, but this is the benefit. It's like the blessing and the curse of the growth is being able to see when others have not progressed.
Yeah, because if you've been on the journey and you've been putting in the work, what you find yourself, we had talked about maybe doing a full episode on this, but it's almost like the downside of personal growth, literally, because there is a downside, and that you're kind of describing that. You're describing what we've learned to be true is that you start to have a lot less patience for those types of behaviors, especially for someone in their 40s.
Right.
Like, you're like, no. Like, if you're not willing to put in the work to learn about yourself, you're going to continue to show up in the same way that continues to create problems, whether it's between you and that individual, if you're witnessing this over and over again, or you're seeing them struggle and you're like, yeah, you're going to continue to struggle unless you do something different. And believe me, I've been that person. Right. And where I just kept banging my head up against the wall. And not to say that I don't keep running into those situations. I mean, if you listen to episode 34, I'm going through a new version of that. Right. And the key is to be able to identify that for oneself. And for me, I identified it because I was like, something just, and I lovingly called them the red flags just kept stacking up against. Well, I decided to finally count the flags and be like, that's more than enough for me to want to ask for help. That's right. And I know that experience was a bit on the extreme side. But the point I'm trying to make is that you start to find yourself wanting to be in relationships where there's a commitment to wanting to show up in a better way and when you don't have it, yeah, you get, and I think you used the word turned off or whatever your word was, but yeah, that's what ends up happening. And then you can find yourself kind of sometimes in a bit of a, I don't know, like I don't want to use the word isolated, but in relationships where they've been around for a long time and they're no longer something that a relationship
serving
that you want to put time in.
That's right.
You don't want to invest in it anymore.
That's right. It's like, it's not serving you. You start to move towards, you know who you are, you know your strengths, you know your weaknesses, you own those, you accept those. You start to move towards doing more of what brings you joy, more of what makes you happy, which P.S. I think is what you're doing in New York. You're going towards those things. And look at you, like you're thriving, you're doing great. And I know you're going through therapy, and I know it seems, like you think, I know what you're thinking. Wait, what? It's true. Like the fact that you're in therapy, which was my last bit of advice here. I see that. I know, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
If you aren't in therapy in your 40s and you're not able to, you're still struggling with accountability, you're still struggling with your direction, you're still struggling with who you are as a person, get the therapy and lean into it.
Yeah. And I think it's for a lot of reasons.
Yes.
And I think it's because what I will tell you is that in our 40s that we start to, in our 20s and 30s, just chapters continue to open. Well, and again, not to say that chapters don't close in those decades, they do. But at 40, it becomes more. So chapters tend to close than open.
Yeah, nobody tells
anybody. If you're not
that.
in a position to emotionally be aware of the impact of that, then it's going to take its toll in some form or fashion. It's going to eventually take a toll. And now, having lived through that exact experience, I see now how critical it is for people in their 40s, which is why I wanted to talk. I mean, obviously, it's why we wanted to start this podcast from a leadership perspective, but I also wanted to share from a personal perspective the reality of not dealing with those chapters closing. And in our 40s, for a lot of us, that can mean graduation from high school if you chose to have children. That could be aging parents, that could be changes in careers, that could be a lot of things. It can be so many things. It's just because of that age and how much of life you've lived, chapters can continue to feel like they're closing. And a lot of times they're good things. It's like I talked about, like there's nothing wrong with Mackie graduating college, and that happened for me, high school and college in my 40s. So it was, she graduated 50, right after I turned 50, but and close enough. And again, those are things to be celebrated, but they're also, they come with some emotional, some emotional changes that you need to be aware of because it can creep up on you. And so I think that's what, if I look back on my 40s, we got a lot right in our 40s because that's when we've made a commitment to this journey that we've been on as leaders and certainly as parents. And I would say that if I had one thing to do over again in my 40s, I would have realized this whole seasons of life, it really kicks in the 40s and the chapters. And again, that's just my word. That's the way I visualize what changes. But I would say I would be a lot more conscious of that. And I would accept that as, yes, that's a fantastic thing that just happened.
Yes.
And it's also going to change your identity.
Yes.
And you need to be aware of it.
Yeah, and okay with it, kind of.
And okay with it, and learn how to celebrate it, but also be okay with a bit of mourning that comes with that chapter closing, and own that too. Don't just sit in the sunshine of it all. Be conscious of how that can impact you.
That's really good. That's really, really good. In the 40s, it's all for me coming together. Like, I feel like this decade, I've been like, I just can see. Just now, I can see for the first time. Just now, I understand what all of this is about. So as we move into the 50s, and the 60s and beyond, it's like, I understand now. I remember when I was a kid, I'd hear people who are my family members that would turn 50 or 60. They'd be like, I'm just getting started. And I'd be like, oh, boo, that's sad that they think that. Now I get it.
Yeah.
Now I get it. I'm thinking, golly, I hope I don't wait till I'm 60 and feel like I'm just getting started. Mm-hmm. What they mean is I see.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And now I know exactly what I want to do next. And even though my time potentially may be shorter to do it, I'm going to do it if that's what I want to do.
Yeah. And it's interesting too. Like, I don't know. I just remember being 20 and 50 sounding and feeling old.
Yes.
And I don't feel that way.
No.
I don't feel old. I feel equipped.
Yes.
Again, in progress. I feel very equipped. And I think there's just something that comes along with wisdom.
Yeah.
And I think, well, it's probably a good segue into 50, but
yeah, it is perfect.
Yeah, it's like, okay, there's something to be said for have lived through life up to this point, and the reflection kicks in. And for me, turning 50, I focused only on one part of that, which I already stated earlier, but I focused only on one part of that, and I didn't get the complete reflection in a way, like I wasn't putting my arms around it in a way that was putting me in a position to really be able to sit in this healthy space that I'm in.
Yeah.
Relative to, you use the right words, like eyes being opened. And I don't believe that I'm in a new chapter, but I don't see it like I'm seeing for the first time. I just see clearer now.
Yeah, clearly.
But clearly now. And I'm telling you all that it can be scary. Mm-hmm. And I do cringe a little when you're not cringe, but I take a deep breath when I hear you say I'm doing well and I'm all this. Yes, I am doing well. And I also can feel very, very scared at times, because when you decide that, okay, I'm going to go in a different direction, whatever it may be, your career or whatever, and you make a commitment to that, you have a lot of people that have expectations of you that are pretty anchored. They're anchored quite solidly. And I'm just now learning how to sort through all of that. So that's an interesting part of what I'm learning in this first 9 months of 50. Right. Is that is going to be the journey going forward for me, at least, and I think everybody has their own individual walk that they're walking. And, but what's great, and I can tell you all in my first 9 months, is the clarity of what you can see because of what you've experienced. And quite frankly, in health, how excited you are about the next. And I think it's easy to think that 40's midlife, but I don't see it that way anymore. Like, why is 50 not, halfway there, or 60 for that matter, And again, I don't want to get into the semantics of age and how that turns out for people, but I don't know. I think it's a perspective that's just very different. It is. And unfortunately, I kind of ran into a wall early on, but I do think it's fortunately that I did that, because it's going to help me, and hopefully, I'll be able to help others too. Yeah, I know you will. I mean, that's the goal. That's right. Well, what I hope for you and me both, and really for our listeners and those of us who are not yet 50, but for me, it's about what success looks like in the 50s is fully grasping what makes me feel energized, connected, and empowered. For me. Yeah. That's it. All those things, if I can lean into those things, if saying no is a good thing, I'll say no.
and feel okay with that. If, you know, looking at a savings account or looking at a retirement account and feeling like I've done the right thing, good. I did that. I worked hard. I did the thing. Here I am. And now I'm going to settle into that. I really want the 50s to be about being precisely who I was meant to be and doing it out loud.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned savings account. I think being smart with your money is important at every decade. I know that Drew would tell us, you know, he's our resident CFP,
Yes.
is that certified financial planner. And if you don't know what that is, please look one up. Please look that up. But what he would say is it's your 40s and your 50s where you amass, you know, you have the most opportunity, I think is what he would say, the most opportunity to really set the course for the rest of your life financially. And so when we first talked about that, I found that to be interesting because I was like, oh, well then what was the 20s, all the savings in the 20s and the 30s for? And he's like, no, that builds up to it. And then he gets on a whole compounding discussion.
Which we
and
need
my
to
eyes
have
crossed.
him on here to talk about that.
We should. Yeah, we should. He's really good at making money talk very easy to digest. But I just think that that's interesting that's the case, is that it's really your 40s and your 50s where you really set the course for acceleration, for whatever it may be, investments. That's typically when you start to really look at investments outside of savings. And again, I mean that meaning like if you're interested in real estate or whatever it may be, those are interesting things to consider during those particular decades of your life. So
right. And so what you're saying is I love that you said between, you know, your 40 and 60 are your big years to amass what you're going to be doing, you know, to set the stage for the rest of your life. And then we think about the rest of our life, the outcome that we're looking for is security, right? Security.
I would think that would be the case for most people, but yeah.
Yeah. And just living your life to its fullest. So, you know, hopefully your commitments that you've been doing all these years have paid off and you're finding satisfaction in even your life's work still, if that's what you choose to do, or starting something completely new. But that's really the goal. And so I thought this might be an interesting thing for us to do because again, I'm just going to reiterate, we talk about it a lot here, what it was like to be in our 20s. And I'll have to shift my mindset from one conversation to another. Let's say I'm working in a one-on-one with someone. For the first 30 minutes, you know, we're talking about something they're struggling with and I offer advice based on my experience. And then the next meeting after that, I'm talking to someone in their 30s or someone who's starting a family or someone who's in the middle of worrying about interest rates because they want to buy a home so desperately, and so on and so forth. And so all of these instances have meaning when we're able to think of it sort of in these decades and the natural progression of life and understanding and comfort level and uncomfortable and all the things that we have to go through to find peace of mind, which really is the culmination of all of it. You want that. You want it through all the decades. And to your point, the way to do that is to be honest, to be accountable, and to understand yourself to the point where you're moving in an agile way emotionally for your mental health and wellness. So I hope that
reiterate enough to staying healthy physically it's a lot easier to stay healthy physically all along the way if you started there versus trying to catch up. I'll just put that out there.
Right.
So
right. And blood work helps with that. I'm just going to throw that in there. I just had mine done recently and it's unbelievable. I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to say it out loud. I'm just healthy, knock on wood.
Yeah.
You know, I'm looking at this blood work. I'm like, I don't know what any of this means. She's like, you don't need to worry. You're like, you're doing great. Like, just keep going. I'm like, okay.
All right.
I think it's good genes.
Okay.
That's when it's evidently a lot of English and Scottish genes, that's another topic.
We digress.
I know.
I think it's interesting too, as we kind of get, I mean, obviously we have no perspective of the decades of 50s I mean, 60s or above. And I mean, I'm 9 months into 50. So
Yeah.
What I would say about the 60s is that well, first of all, the 50s and the 60s is like the consciousness of, again, Lord willing, is that I'm so grateful to be aware that, I think we can just focus on, oh my God, I turned 50. Oh my God, I turned 50.
Yeah.
But I really want to think of it differently this time around because I remember doing that when I turned 40. I want it to be more so, wow, the opportunity to do so many things in a matter of 10 years, the difference one can make and with oneself and on behalf of others. That to me is the eye-opening experience that I'm feeling right now. And that is what's really, once I got past the struggle and the need to ask for help and start to get help in an accelerated fashion, I started to quickly see, wow, there's so much to look forward to, and I'm not going to be shackled to a former belief that I cannot do amazing things because I turned 50. And I feel as though previous generations could get stuck. And again, I'm referencing people that, that I see get stuck because they're a certain age and they start to lose confidence in their abilities for whatever reason. Again, there's so many different versions of that. I want us to flip the script. I want us to be the generation that flips the script, and I sure as hell want that for the next generations of coming. And so that's what I see for 50s and 60s and beyond, is us changing a shackled belief around what we cannot do now or anymore. Let's change that. So that's a little bit of motivation that I'm using relative to this particular, season that I'm in.
I love that. I love flipping the script on its birthdays, in these markers of life. I remember, I think when I turned 45-ish, I, like my mom in particular was like, can you believe it? I was like, hell yeah, I can believe it.
Lived it.
Yes. I'm here, man. Like I did it. I don't want to think of it as like, oh my gosh, I'm so old. I want to think of it as, oh my gosh, I did it. Like I'm here. I made it. I made it, man. And I'm going to keep going.
Amen.
Amen.
Oh my gosh, this turned into a sermon all of a sudden.
It sure did. And I'm going to now congratulate people. Like when people have milestone birthdays, 30, 40, 45, 50, 55, then you start going on the fives, right?
Oh yeah.
Like the midway through, it's like, man, congratulations. Like good for you. Like what did you learn over the last 10 years? That might be a good question to ask people.
Yeah.
Make them really think
question.
about it. Yeah. Have you changed at all over the last 10 years? Nah, I'm the same person. Well, boo. Doubt that very seriously.
Well, boo.
All right, let's circle back to the music because I'm really dying for you to share a little bit about that event. And you had the two people to your right. That's where you left off, and you were in the VIP.
Well, right. Well, they were artists. And so, So, and they ended up sponsoring this event. And so they go in early. And so I'm left there, and I end up meeting this couple, and they said, we don't recognize you, but you look familiar. And so I was like, okay. And they're like, are you, have you been to this event before? So apparently this event's 20 something years old. It's called Rockers on Broadway. And they basically bring Broadway performers and other singers to honor a personality. And that could be a songwriter, that could be an artist of any sorts. And this is to benefit a foundation, like I said earlier. And so they're this lovely couple who were people were so friendly to me. I mean, it was just, I felt so welcomed. It was a very, from the minute I walked in, felt so welcomed. And it wasn't the venue was not that large. So it was a very Again, I don't know how I got tickets. I mean, when I looked around the room, it was like, wow, how did you even find yourself here? Anyway, this couple is very sweet, and their daughter's been performing at this event for a while. So what I didn't know is that she was 16. And I mean, I posted it on, posted some of her performances on social media. Maybe we'll do that for this episode, but she's a prodigy in my opinion. Like, we're going to hear her on the radio. And again, 16 years old, and
Amazing.
She had this incredible, I don't know, she's just so damn talented.
Was she wearing the all black?
Yeah, and had,
Okay.
I mean, sounded, I don't want to say Amy Winehouse, but she did have a little bit of that
voice, yes,
raspy, soulful, like you would have, if you didn't see her, you would have easily thought she was in her 30s.
Yeah.
Like, her
She's a
voice
baby.
was so mature. So I'm just meeting this lovely couple who's so in support of their daughter's journey. And then I mentioned, you know, our daughter was pursuing a career in live theater and graduated NYU, and it felt so good for them to actually talk to someone who is in the same seat. And we basically got to talk about our vulnerabilities around our children pursuing this wild and woolly career path. And, you know, their daughter had made the decision. She started on live stage, and she's made the decision to go pop music now. And she, rightly so. Wow. She's incredible. So they asked me to sit at their table. Again, I have a single ticket. They have a really great seats, but they said, we have an extra space and we want you to be at our table. And so the night just kept going. And so I would recognize people that were coming up to perform. So Diane Warren's in front. And so here's where it gets wackadoo, meaning you're not going to believe me because it sounds like Tall Tales. So, but I have proof. I have proof. So a performer would come out. So then her daughter performs almost right away and blows me away. And then Broadway performers. And then they would talk about the shows that they were in before, as they were announced by the MC. And the MC, you would recognize him too, but I forget his name. Anyway, he was somebody. And then the woman, Michelle, she just kept tapping me on the shoulder when a performer would come out. She'd be like, okay, do you know who that is? And I'm like, no, I don't. They go, oh, well, that's so-and-so. That's Faith Hill and Tim McGraw's daughter. And she sings La La La. So it just kept going. And then there would be another Broadway star, and they were performing this music that Diane Warren either wrote and or produced. And Diane hasn't even got on stage yet. So then the next tap on my shoulder, a couple performances down, do you know who that is? I'm like, no, I don't. And which is the theme of this evening. And I think she was understanding that. Yeah. And so she goes, do you recognize that guitar player that just came on stage? And I was like, no. She goes, well, that's Billy Joel's guitar player. And that's Billy Joel's daughter. And right there in the front, like right in front of you, that's Christy Brinkley, her mom. And so it just kept going like that. Well, in this event venue, they all know each other. And so they're coming up to me and talking to me like I'm one of them. And I'm having to, and I'm just congratulating them. And they think I'm just part of maybe I'm going to get up there and perform. And so the night just kept going like that. And so for me, I mean, I could not have stumbled into a more magical music moment. My first, not even week in New York, I guess it was officially my first week in New York when I went to this event and went alone, didn't know a soul. And I woke up first of all, and then they invite me to the VIP after party where I met all of these performers. And I had bid on an auction item, so they remembered that. And then, you know, they were thanking me for the support, whatever. And I woke up the next morning and I was just reflecting on how special of a night was. And I pick up my phone and I knew I was handing my phone to people as I was making connections with people. I had 7 numbers that
Like people had texted you like, hi, this is
hi,
so-and-so.
and let's follow up, and if you'd like a friend for lunch, and
That's awesome.
you know, and well, by the way, we have another event, and maybe you want to come to my reading. I'm producing a new play on Broadway. In fact, I'm going to that reading next week, so that'll be something
That's
fun we can talk
amazing.
about, because I don't even know what a reading is.
Well, we're gonna find
I
out.
was like, what is a reading? So Mackie's going to have to fill me in. But anyway, yeah, it was magical, and it was just what I needed. And I felt like it was almost this divine intervention of me Googling what the hell to do in New York and finding myself in this community of performers that were just so talented, and it just couldn't have been better. Oh, and by the way, I just want to say this, that Faith Hillington McGraw's daughter, I cannot remember her name, she sang 9 to 5, which was really cool.
Love it. Love
Just
it.
FYI, Dolly is always in my hemisphere.
Yes, she is.
My orbit.
What if you end up being like a socialite? What if you like, what if Danelle's on the cover of People magazine in the next year?
Oh my gosh. I aspire to be not a socialite, and I aspire not to be on People magazine. So that's not the goal here.
The socialite that came to New York and shook it up.
I don't even know what a socialite is. Like how do you get that?
I guess it's
moniker?
like an influencer. It's like today's version of an influencer. I think that's an old word.
I think it's old, and I don't think it's a good word. I think you might want to lose it.
It's like
especially as it relates to me, please.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Well, thank you for sharing that. And we're all so glad that your time in New York is fun, and you look really energized. I mean, you're not here in the room with me, but I can see you on camera, and you look really happy. And
yeah, I am. I
rosy-cheeked.
am. The decision has come with lots of emotion, and I do feel good about it. And I'm here to get healthy and to really lean in, like I talked about on episode 34. Really lean into creative energy that is new and different, and on behalf of DMA, but then also on these other philanthropies that I'm interested in, and this new business venture. So yeah, it's a great place to be creative and to really, lean into possibility.
That's right.
I don't know how else to explain it.
And we'll have more of Danelle's experiences in New York on future episodes. So I hope our listeners will come back and hear what's cooking with you. I know you have a lot of, not to tease, but to tease, you have a lot of podcasts coming up with guests. So
yes, that's what part of this adventure is leading us towards, is meeting amazing people and honestly connecting with people that I already know, and to be in a position to have them on as guests in a studio versus just do, this remote version. So I'm very excited about that. So yeah, we have some great episodes coming up with some very just incredible people that have been on and continue to be on the Self Smarter journey. And so I'm very excited about that.
Yay.
Yay.
All right. It's been a wonderful time with you today, Danelle. Thank you so much. And until next time, we send you into the week with grateful hearts.
Thank you, everyone.
As always, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Self Smarter Podcasts. You can also leave a rating or review if you enjoyed what you heard today. Not only does this mean so much to us, but it also helps other leaders and future leaders find our community. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us in becoming Self Smarter. This podcast is produced by Snacks Media, and music is from a free platform. Well, that is until Brandy Carlisle reaches out to us to write the original score for our podcast. Friends, have a great rest of your day.